April 2nd, 1502. Ludlow Castle. There are no celebratory bells here, only the muffled cries of agony. Picture this: a 15-year-old boy, dying, not from a battle wound, but from an enemy consuming him from within. His body is a furnace. Sweat pours from him like a waterfall, soaking his bedsheets in minutes. Beside him, his 16-year-old wife kneels, whispering desperate Spanish prayers. Just days ago, this boy was the hope of a nation. Now he is disintegrating. This is Prince Arthur Tudor, the eldest son of Henry VII, born to become the second King Arthur of England. But when modern scientists tried to solve this historical medical mystery, they uncovered a truth more chilling than any disease. The death of this one boy planted a profound terror in the heart of his younger brother, terror that would forge one of the most notorious tyrants in history, Henry VIII. Because if Arthur had lived, there would be no Henry VIII, no brutal English Reformation, no 2 beheaded wives, no tearing England apart. One death, one brief illness, irrevocably changed 500 years of history. What truly happened in those 6 days? And why was Arthur's death so pivotal that it had to birth Henry VIII? To understand the sheer magnitude of that death, we have to go back to where the fear began. Years before Arthur was born, England was a massive graveyard, torn apart by the Wars of the Roses between the houses of Lancaster and York. The madness only ended in 1485, when an almost unknown claimant, Henry Tudor, defeated King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, and became Henry VII. But his throne was built on blood and mud, not solid stone. His enemies were everywhere, just waiting for a moment of weakness. Henry knew he couldn't win by constant war. He had to win by marriage. So, he married Elizabeth of York, merging the 2 warring bloodlines. It was a political masterstroke, but the real key was the child they were about to have. When Elizabeth became pregnant, the entire kingdom held its breath. This child wasn't just a prince, he was England's vow of peace. The survival of the fragile Tudor dynasty depended on this one baby, and the child born in 1486 carried all that hope. They named him Arthur, after the mythical king who unified Britain. From the moment he could walk, he was groomed for kingship. He was tutored by Europe's finest scholars, debating in Latin and mastering philosophy and history. He was an intellectual, a future diplomat, described by a contemporary as the most loving and true prince. Everyone believed he would bring a wise and peaceful reign. But in that same nursery, there was another child, Henry, born 4 years later. Henry was the spare. While Arthur was buried in Latin textbooks, Henry was allowed to play, to learn sword fighting and jousting. He was trained to be a nobleman, a man of action, but never the king. The brothers were close, but they both understood the stark truth: only one would wear the crown. This difference forged 2 completely separate characters, and you have to remember that, because this very distinction would lead one to accept death, and the other to rage against it. Of course, Henry VII needed more than just an heir. He needed a powerful alliance to protect Arthur. The choice was Spain, the mighty kingdom of Ferdinand and Isabella. They had a daughter, Catherine of Aragon. Negotiations dragged on for a decade, fueled by Spanish skepticism. Will this fragile Tudor dynasty even last, they wondered. Finally, a deal was sealed, a contract worth millions in gold and a political lifeline. Arthur and Catherine began exchanging letters in Latin, and a genuine affection bloomed between the 2 teenagers who had never even met. In November 1501, Catherine arrived in England. Their wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral was the event of the century. Everything was finally set. England was safe. That night, after the bishop blessed the marriage bed, the 2 teenagers were left alone. And this is the question that would tear England apart 20 years later. What did they do that night? Did they consummate the marriage? Arthur was later said to have boasted, "I have been in Spain this night." A youthful, joking brag. At the time, nobody cared. But 20 years later, that boast would become Henry VIII's justification for challenging the Pope and founding his own church. After the wedding, Arthur and Catherine moved to Ludlow Castle, where Arthur began his apprenticeship in ruling Wales. But since the wedding, Arthur had been weakening. He was thin, easily tired. Then, in March 1502, death came crawling up from the town below the castle walls. It was called the sweating sickness. It was unlike any other plague. It didn't cause buboes. It killed faster, more savagely. Victims felt their blood boiling. A terrifying fever set in, and sweat poured out of them relentlessly until they died from dehydration and exhaustion, often within hours. On March 27th, Arthur collapsed. He was burning up, delirious. At the very same time, Catherine fell ill too. This is a crucial fact. Royal physicians tried everything: bleeding, purges, prayers. Nothing worked. Catherine, with her youth and strength, slowly recovered. Arthur did not. For 6 agonizing days, he suffered. And then, on the cold dawn of April 2nd, 1502, Prince Arthur Tudor died. He died before he could ever be king. The news had to reach Greenwich Palace. The king's confessor was sent to break it to Henry VII. The priest entered the room and said nothing. He simply quoted a line from Scripture: "Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" Henry VII understood instantly. He shattered. This wasn't just losing a son, it was the collapse of his entire dynasty. He had staked everything on Arthur, and now he was gone. He summoned his wife, Elizabeth of York. She saw her husband's face and knew. She didn't weep. She embraced him and said, "Sire, we still have Henry, a strong son. We are still young. We will have more children." She held the survival of the dynasty on her shoulders. Then, she left the room, went to her private chambers, and completely collapsed, overcome with grief for her firstborn son. Elizabeth kept her word. She became pregnant again, a desperate attempt to fill the void. But in February 1503, she died shortly after giving birth. In less than a year, Henry VII had lost his perfect heir and the wife who had secured his crown, and who witnessed this total collapse, 10-year-old Prince Henry. In an instant, he went from the carefree spare to the most important person in England. The weight of the Tudor dynasty fell onto his young shoulders. He watched his perfect brother die horribly in 6 days. He watched his strong mother die, trying to produce a replacement. He watched his father turn from a shrewd king into a paranoid, money-obsessed man living in perpetual fear. Do you see? Henry VIII's obsession wasn't born. It was forged in the fires of that tragedy. It was a fear that the dynasty was too fragile, that death could strike at any time, and that he would die without a male heir to justify Arthur's sacrifice. This terror clung to him. When he married Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, he hoped for the best. But as she suffered miscarriages, stillbirths, and produced only one daughter, Mary, that old fear ignited. Henry didn't see a health problem. He saw a curse from God for taking his brother's wife. This fear led to the divorce from Catherine. When the Pope refused, Henry didn't hesitate. He broke England away from the Roman Catholic Church, declared himself its supreme head, and unleashed a century of religious violence that reshaped the nation, all because a brother died. For 500 years, historians have debated what killed Arthur. The sweating sickness is the popular theory, but if it was so contagious, why did Catherine, who fell ill at the same time, survive while her supposedly healthier husband perished? This has led to other theories, like tuberculosis, or a virulent strain of influenza. Maybe they were ill at the same time, but from 2 completely different causes. We simply don't have an answer. Arthur's tomb, in Worcester Cathedral, remains sealed, and the true cause of his death remains locked in the English soil. Just imagine for a second, what if Arthur had lived? He would have become King Arthur I, a gentle, diplomatic, and intellectual monarch. He likely never would have divorced Catherine. There would be no English Reformation, no Henry VIII, no Elizabeth I. The map of Europe would look fundamentally different. A 15-year-old boy burned up from the inside, and in doing so, gave birth to a legendary tyrant. What do you think? Was this a necessary evil for history to progress, or one of its most senseless twists? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to explore more lost currents of history, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.